planets?
Constellations.
Constellations.
Like
Yeah, it
Libra, Taurus,
Summer-
Sagittarius.
I think
You know, the star
in
shapes.
November, it's,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
only like
So
maybe
then,
even
could I go
less.
back to
It's like
Mary
less than
Magdalene
2
possibly in
years.
13th disciple?
Well, right. Well, technically Jesus was the 13th disciple, right? But then he also talked about Mary Magdalene though too, right?
She could have been a
She
disciple.
could have been, right?
Well, yeah, well, she was for the time
Right.
that
could've been,
she
but-
was.
But
Does that
because
make
she was a
sense?
woman, they didn't want women to be.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right.
She was, but he is like you know.
Well, he's
what
the
I'm saying.
son.
That's what I'm saying. He is regardless. But
Right.
remember, when he was not there, she was still representing.
But
Okay.
it's,
You
it's,
understand?
it's because she
Right.
was a woman, that's why.
No, nigga, she's still a disciple.
Nah, but
Who?
I feel
Mary
that no,
Magdalene.
but
She's not a
nah, but
disciple.
that's
She's a
what.
disciple.
No, she's
Some
the
say-
origin
no,
of the
no.
I'm
feminine.
like,
No, some say that.
And they stripped her at that.
she was what?
Bro, she a disciple.
She was what? Origin of what?
Mary-
She was the origin of
Mary
feminine.
Magdalene.
She's an origin feminine.
Origin of
Yeah,
the
she's the
feminine.
origin of feminine.
So she's like
Right.
divine
Does that
feminine.
not-
She
Is that
she has divinity of yeah.
She's definitely what?
Over the disciple.
No, it's just she was dethroned with the subjugation through Christianity.
Because she's a woman.
Oh yeah, like they like.
The creation of, I mean, at least if you're if you're looking
We're
at
not
it more ancient.
Are you talking about like during the time or like just Christianity in general?
And how they.
Well, I mean, like
covered
the modern
story.
Christianity, at least.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm not
we're
talking
talking
about
about like
that.
what,
Yeah.
what people are discussing
Yeah,
in
yeah,
America.
no, I know, no,
because
we
in
was
terms
just
of
talking
because
about,
Christianity
like,
tried to say
what
that-
translation it came from.
Because they try to say she was a prostitute, but the
Right,
natural.
what'd you say? Between her.
Between Eve and Lilith.
Right.
What
Right.
happened?
What was that?
Even Lilith being the representation of the divine feminine, right?
That was stripped of it because Eve knew she was equal to Adam.
No. I thought,
And
Lilith then.
you said Lilith?
No, Eve.
No,
sorry.
Eve.
Oh.
It was Lilith.
Whoa.
So,
Say that
It was
again.
Lilith. Lilith. Her origin story is she was created equal to Adam,
She was
but
the
she
first.
realized she was divine, and she wanted to be free of the garden. She felt imprisoned by it, so she, of her own free will, left, and then Eve was created after her from Adam.
as
to
an
be
equal.
more submissive.
Submissive, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
to
she
be
was
more
too dominant,
submissive,
right?
right.
Because Lilith thought she could do whatever
Huh.
she wanted.
Right.
And she did.
She didn't want to bow.
Turns
Yeah.
out she could. So she did. And then she went and murdered a bunch of babies.
She
Right.
just murdered all.
Right.
They call it murder all demons. So
Yep. I have.
Yeah, mother of demons.
Yeah.
Well, since we
Yeah.
brought her up again a second time.
That's
I
interesting name to call yourself.
Made that
Murder
by
demons.
Well,
the
the she.
angels of the divine. Then you know that story.
She was exiled in the Garden of Eden. Was the first wife,
He sent the two angels after her. She was in the cage. She didn't want to come back. So
the first Eve who returned to the dust. She was the first Eve who returned to the dust. She returned back to the dust.
She went back to dust.
Lilith.
I thought she went down to the underworld after.
Well, that's the dust, though, right? That's the dust.
What is?
She was the first Eve who returned back to the dust. All right, you want to call that the underworld?
Oh, that's the underworld. Oh.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could call it that. Okay, so all right, let's finish this up. So the procession of the equinox, right? That is what we call an age, which age represents 2,150 years. So Moses, all right, Moses represents the ram, right? The ram represents Taurus, right? Even the Jews now, they blow out of a ram's horn, right? So Moses told everybody in the Bible, go in and out from the gate until the gate and slay every man and his brother and every man and his companion and every his neighbor in Exodus. Because he wanted you to wipe out everything of that age, thus bringing forth the new age, which was Jesus, and that was representation of Pisces, the fish, right? That's why the Pope's hat is really a fish head, right? If I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to be a fish's mouth.
Is it?
Really?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, Pope's hat.
like Dagon, right?
What's that? Who's that?
The Philistine god. They try to say the Pope was like a reputation. You know, if you look at the statue of Dagon, right?
Right.
How he's a fish god and like.
Okay, he's a fish god.
He also
Okay.
has a similar hat
Right.
that
Okay.
the Pope wears.
Okay. So
You said Dagon?
Dagon, D-A-G-O-N. If you look him up on your phone. Look him on your phone. Dagon, he's like a Philistine guy. Like if you see him, he looks like a fish. It's inside the Pope.
So Jesus is the next age representing Pisces. And when they asked Jesus what's going to happen next after he's gone, he said, behold, when ye entered the city, there shall be a man to meet you bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he enters in Luke, right? Meaning Aquarius, right? He's holding a pitcher of water and whatnot. And that's why we enter the age of Aquarius. Now, I think that's what we're in right now, right? Now, the next age is the age of Capricorn. All right, that's going to happen. Did I write down when that's supposed to happen? 2050 years from 4300 AD. So I think, what year is that breakdown to?
Which one?
Because if it's 4300 plus 2150, what's that?
300 what?
4300 plus 2150.
50?
Yeah.
6,000.
Yeah, 6450.
AD though, right?
Yeah.
So you have to, there's math to be done there, right? To break it
Math,
back down.
math.
Right.
Yeah, so what year is that? Anybody
That's why I
know?
always get fucked up. But it took me a minute to even figure out the Capricorn was like, what's next?
Oh my
But
god!
Capricorn
I
is
remember
next.
somebody. I remember
Just
watching
so you
something.
know, the
Somebody
ram
said
is Aries.
Right. I said Taurus.
Yeah.
Right. Taurus was the bull. Right. That was what was before. Remember Moses came through and made him shut down all the bull worshiping that was happening. Right. That was what was before.
So he shifted into
Right.
Aries
Right.
from Taurus.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you for correcting me. All right. Now that's pretty much done with the allegory. I mean, and then we have Noah's Ark, which is stolen from the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Explain that one.
It's the same story. So in the Epic of Gilgamesh,
He was a giant.
right? But it's a whole fucking Naruto saga to that fucking scripture. Though, like it's mad levels to it and all that, and the whole thing about harnessing data and harnessing DNA. You know what I'm saying? And storing it for the flood and all that stuff was also a copy from that story. Moses was set in a basket, set adrift through a river, evaded infanticide, which is the killing of mass babies. He was raised by royalty. And the same stories are also the same for Sargon, Minos, Meses, and Menon in India.
Sargon.
Sargon, yes. Forgot Sargon is a Sumerian, I believe. It's also the same exact stories. The Ten Commandments come from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the what is it, 101 negative confections. But the word negative doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, though. It's more so about energy. So don't get that word weird.
Wait, I thought the Book of Exodus from ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead.
What do you mean by Exodus?
Because you know how they say the Book of Exodus is around the time when the Israelites were exiled in Egypt?
Okay, right. But this is when the Ten Commandments come into play.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Ten Commandments.
Okay.
So the Ten Commandments of thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not do this. All those things were in the 101 things in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Because it's like they would you'll die, and then it'll be a scale, right? They put your soul next to a feather and weigh it out. But like when you look at this fucking list though, like you can't do shit, dude.
I mean, like at all.
Like at all.
No, like at all.
They had to define it to 10, right?
Like something in this room is off.
Off, right?
Like 100 things. Nah, like 20 things. Where's my money? Niggas knees out, we wild.
So who stole them?
Well, we're about to get to that right now. Okay.
Who?
Who stole from them? Who stole?
from.
Okay, yeah. So let's get to this point. All right, so who is Jesus Christ, right? Now, you know about Yeshua, right? The story of Yeshua? Okay,
I
so
don't think so.
no? Okay, so Yeshua was a black man, right? who lived, who was saying he was born in Egypt. No, was he born in Egypt? Or did he just live in Egypt?
He said that he lived in Egypt.
He lived in Egypt. He wasn't born there, though, right? He was born somewhere in Africa.
Or was he born
I got that shit.
Jesus?
in Israel?
Yeshua.
He's an Israelite, right?
Yeshua.
He's an Israelite, right?
Believe so.
He's an Israelite, and then he went to. You remember when he left Jerusalem because they're trying to kill all the newborn babies?
Right. He was not Christian. Hold on here. Hold on. Yeshua was not Christian. He kept the understanding of Christ consciousness and ascended to the level we skipping it though. I don't have down when he was born. You know where Yeshua was born? Yeshua?
Wasn't he?
No, he lived in Egypt though. At the age of 12, he went to Egypt.
Oh,
right.
shit.
So what happened?
Nah, I'm gonna be wrong.
He went to born in Jerusalem then.
Had to be somewhere over there, right?
Jerusalem. That sounds more appropriate. That sounds
right.
That
King Herod
sounds
tried to kill
exactly
him.
Right. But after that same thing with the Jesus Christ story though, right? At the age of 12, he went to Egypt. He started his practice, his shrine he went to. He visited his study all over the place. He studied there. He studied in Tibet.
India.
He went to the Dalai Lama. He learned Reiki, energy healing, meditation, all that, etc. And he went up to Christ consciousness. Now, Christ state consciousness is this level of state of consciousness that can be achieved through certain levels of tapping into oneself, right? We all could achieve Christ consciousness, right? But he was the one to do it. He was the one to spread this, though, as well. Right? What made him special. But we all were able to tap into it. That's when Unc brought up to me the person to bring up the idea that maybe Jesus wasn't just one person. You know, it was a following now that was happening. It was maybe hundreds of people. But
Right.
yeah, right.
I mean, he said,
Right. But not just what it was related to. Huh?
And see, like that's what I wanted to say.
Interesting.
Jesus.
So it's funny that these
Interesting.
conversations are aligning because I firmly stand on that. Like Jesus got had hella babies. He was nothing in mad bitches. I just don't care. And he got hella offspring.
It just started at Mary Magdalene and end at Mary Magdalene.
There's just no way. There's no way they was keeping track of all of that.
Energy doesn't lie.
Yeah, right.
Energy does. You can
He's
have
a
a baby
virgin.
by having a.
Jesus ain't no damn virgin.
But this story,
No, you can impregnate
Don't talk
people
about
with a
my-
look.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah, especially a thing like that.
Other people in
Literally impregnated everything.
now Yeshua had all the stories of Jesus, right? But Pope Borgia had a son named Caesar Borgia, and he was the Pope's son, but he wanted to be a general though. He was like, I'm not for this.
Wasn't that Da Vinci's lover?
Who? Caesar Borgia?
Yeah.
I ain't know about that.
Yeah,
That's some
yeah,
shit.
that was-
No, dude was fucking.
Yeah, that was
That's some sick shit.
That's how they ended up with
Tell
the
me about
pictures that we
Caesar
see of
Borgia.
Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's who painted that. Da Vinci did
That's who
paint them,
painted
right?
that.
It was
But they were
Vinci?
fucking?
Yeah.
What? That's
Wait, he-
crazy. That's a lot of power going on.
The Pope?
Who was stopping that? Who was
Yeah, it
stopping
was
that
a big
situation?
secret
That's
amongst the
sick.
church for a while.
Who was telling you
Yeah, Caesar Borgia was Da Vinci's lover,
Okay.
and that his father was the Pope.
Right.
At some
And
point. So
he was a pope. He was the most gangster pope. Pope Borgia. He finessed and swindled his whole way into the papacy. It was fucked
They
up.
all did.
Yeah, but he was nasty with it. I mean, at least publicly, openly nasty with it.
Because Madam Hallie children.
No, the Pope's son. The Pope's son.
Caesar
I do remember in this the documentary.
Yeah, we're about to.
I remember in this documentary I watched about like different gay people. Like it talked about Da Vinci like having a few different lovers. Or
I've never heard that one.
Or having
I never
different.
heard
You might have one at least.
It makes sense.
Abraham Lincoln had four boyfriends.
Different back then.
Gay.
He had, they're called the
That's
Force.
gay.
They're called
Maybe
the
Alexander the
Force
Great had
Wars.
fucking
The Force
male
Wars.
concubines.
I think that's
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
hilarious. I love that. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, like that movie.
Oh,
Yo, it's not a movie about
What?
Alexander.
yeah. They did depict that.
A newer one, right? It's like a newer.
Not the
It's an old one.
nah mid 2000s.
Old one.
that weirdos in it.
I think it was an HBO show.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised they never had no kids.
They all had this thing dead though. Like they
That's
just
what I'm
didn't.
saying.
That's definitely how it
Imagine
is.
a world.
They just don't.
Imagine a world.
They just didn't keep it
No
going.
babies.
In a world
With no
where there are no
They
babies.
just fucking for generations.
They never pulled out back then. Like
Some of them did.
These
If you
Jimmy
pulled
hats
out
wasn't
that
as blue as,
point
you know what I mean?
Some of them did probably.
In a world where you nut in your neighbor. On the wreck.
Yo,
On the
Metro.
Yes.
Say it
So,
was the milkman's
what's-
child.
You remember that
Also-
story where some guy,
Shot.
a guy falls asleep on a rock in the, I think it's an Old Testament story, but I forget which exactly it was. I think it's someone that started with an A.
fall asleep. What's the story? You fall asleep on a rock.
Yeah, well, anyway,
What's
Carl
that?
Jung, he falls asleep on the rock and like then he wakes up and he's facing a certain way or something like that.
What?
And
You talking about
Carl
Jacob's
Jung
ladder?
was saying that like he was
What?
facing towards the North Star, I believe, or the star
In the east.
in the east.
Okay.
And I believe that was like saying that like we came from the stars.
Right.
Carl
Right. Coming from that star in the east, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Serious shit. Right.
Hmm?
Okay. I don't know that story though. I don't know
Is
that
it an
story.
Old Testament story?
Yeah.
Was it a guy was sleeping on the rock?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's.
It's
also
just a,
false.
it's
It
just a
sounds like
parable.
it's like it's on Jacob's ladder. But,
Maybe that. Maybe
they talking about Jacob's ladder. But in
But
that
Like when
story, though,
Jacob
Jacob had a dream though.
Wrestled
Where he
with the
saw a ladder.
angel. Was
Huh?
it that?
Say again.
When Jacob wrestled with the angel.
Wrestled with God.
Maybe.
He
It
didn't
was
wrestle
an
with
angel.
God.
Hmm?
It was an angel. That
Jacob
was
wrestled-
representing God.
I thought it was. I thought it was just a man.
Jacob wasn't
I thought it was just
He
a
wrestled
man.
him for 24 hours.
That's crazy.
And didn't submit.
And then that's why God changed him to
And then he
Yaakov.
became
Israel.
Israel.
where were we leave off? Let's knock this story up. So Caesar Borgia,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So he wants to be a general, but they got him as a a pope's. He's a high priest, but he wants to be a general. So one of the ways that he finds out to be that is he takes the story of Yeshua, right? And they change things up. And again, Da Vinci was also the one who depicted him as this figure, right? Now, even more before that, though, the Greeks, the Romans, right? After the fall of Egypt, wanted to put Egypt, not Egypt, they didn't fall necessarily, but they lost all the power, right? When Ptolemy became, Ptolemy, I think it was the first he became into it. He wanted to put himself inside the Egyptian pantheon so he could have more power in this situation. So Ptolemy came up with the idea of creating Serapis, right? Now Serapis is the name of Jesus Christ before he was Jesus Christ. So it was Serapis, and then it goes Jesus the Christ, and then it just becomes Jesus Christ, right? Now all of these things, the whole story of Jesus Christ being born of a virgin, is them taking the stories of Osiris, Horus, and Isis. Isis being the Virgin Mary, Osiris being the father situation, right? And then Horus being the son. Okay, so it was a created situation, right? With divine properties, but created nonetheless by the Romans, right? Now, there was a series of councils called the Council of Nicaea, which spanned for over, I think it was a couple hundred years. Constant meetings of them fabricating the Bible, fabricating the story, how they want to go about this, that, and the third. Rewrite the whole situation for it to be, Christianity as we know it today.
Yes.
In the beginning, I think it was only the books of Matthew, Luke, and John were written.
Yeah, Luke and John.
And then things were added. This, that, and the third. Right.
Yeah.